Hey everyone, and welcome to Youth Discipleship class. Today is Sunday, April 19th maybe, and we're in day number 3,475 of our quarantine, or at least that's what it feels like. We're so glad that you're joining us today, and I do want to remind you that we meet on video conference every Wednesday night. Our middle schoolers join from 6:45 to 7:15, and then our high schoolers join from 7:15 to 7:45. I really miss seeing everybody, and our Wednesday nights have been a great time for us to get together, learn about God's Word, and connect with one another during this time. We're going to be looking at a story found in John chapter 20, verses 19 to 31, but more specifically, we are going to be looking at verses 24 to 29, I think. Yeah, verses 24 to 29. So I really want you to grab a Bible today. I'm actually not going to read the story. I'm just going to retell it in my own words, and hopefully you can find the story and read it on your own later. And the story that happens is that Jesus is risen, and he promises to go and visit his disciples. But the problem is the disciples are afraid of all the Jewish leaders that are coming after them. They discover that Jesus' body is not in the tomb, and they start going after them to figure out where Jesus is at. Now, these disciples have locked themselves in a house, locked themselves in a room. They're quarantining for themselves. And Jesus appears to them, and he says, "Peace be with you. I'm here. I'm showing up in the middle of your fear, in the middle of your doubt, and don't worry, because I am right here with you, as I've promised." Now, one of the disciples weren't there during this time, and they went out to Thomas and said, "Hey, we have seen Jesus." And Thomas has some doubt, and he says, "Well, unless I see Jesus with my own two eyes, I'm not going to believe that he's around." And so the next time that the disciples are all together, Thomas is there, and he looks straight at Thomas and says, "I want you to look at my hands. I want you to see the holes where they were pierced when I was hanging on the cross." And all of a sudden, Thomas says, "Wow, this really is Jesus. This really happened, and now my fear and my doubts are gone." And Jesus tells him something very specific and very eye-opening for all of us. He says, "I want you to go, I want you to stop doubting and believe." Now, this is a great story, and it comes at a great time when we're all finding ourselves in fear and in doubt about what's happening with this coronavirus. Now, we know that God is doing some amazing things around the world, and he's doing some great things in you and in your family and even in your community. And we want to ask some good questions so that we can reflect on the story and then respond to it. The first question we want to ask is, when have you needed some peace and quiet? I know you've been stuck at home with your family and with your siblings, and they could be driving you crazy, and you just want a couple of minutes for yourself. Close the door, get some peace and quiet from all the screaming and the chaos. Yeah, I know that that's been happening. The next question might seem a little obvious, but why do you think the disciples were hiding from these Jewish leaders? Now, of course, Jesus has been risen, and there's a lot of questions going on through the city about these disciples that have been following Jesus. They probably think the disciples took his body, they put it somewhere, and they probably don't believe that he's risen. When have you been overjoyed by God's presence? I know for me, this happens when we gather together for worship on Sunday morning. And I'm standing with you, and we're lifting our voices together as one, and we are worshiping God with all of our hearts. This might be a great opportunity for you to make some comments down below. Interact with us and interact with others as the video plays. You might learn something new about God that you've never known before. Now, you might have to go back and look at the story a little bit more closely. But why do you think Jesus says, "Peace be with you," 3 times in this story? I think he's trying to make a point here by saying, "I want you to experience peace. I know you're fearful. I know you're doubting. I know it's hard to see exactly what's going on in the world, but I want you to have peace." So he tells them this phrase about 3 times in a short amount of time. Now, I'd love to hear your response to this question, but what are some ways that you've experienced God's peace? Now, we have one last question for you today, and this question really digs deep and allows us to be challenged by it. But who do you know that needs to hear this story And how would you share it with them? Now take some time and make some comments down below. Interact with us as we continue to study God's Word together. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and have a great week.